Welcome to another episode of B2B Marketing Futures, the podcast for B2B marketers sponsored by AdSact, the B2B ad platform. Today we are tackling a topic that every B2B marketer has an opinion on: fit versus intent. Should you focus on targeting the companies that are the best match for your product or the ones actively showing interest right now? We'll explore how to find the right balance between precision and timing, and how that balance shifts when you go up market versus SMB, and how AI is changing the game for both. Before we dive in, I'd love for each of our guests to introduce themselves and share a bit about what they are working on. So, welcome everyone. Lisa, would you like to give a sentence on yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Joaquin. Hi, Lisa Schwartz here, a marketing director for Digitate, which is a TCS company, and working with B2B enterprise marketing and ABM, digital marketing, demand gen, all the above.
All the above. Welcome, Lisa. Cecilia, welcome.
Thank you, Joaquin. Yes, my name is Cecilia. I'm a marketing manager at IFS. Work on the demand generation side, campaign generation, digital marketing, ABM as well. And I have been in marketing for 14 years now. So in B2B. So yeah, it's a little bit about me.
Welcome, Cecilia. Courtney, welcome.
Hi, I'm Courtney. I'm most recently with Sage as a performance marketing manager, but I also worked at Equifax and several other companies over my career. So I like to say I'm a marketer of all trades. I'm just not everything to be dangerous. So I've done everything from social to B2B marketing to B2C marketing to working for convention visitors bureau. So I bring a wealth of experience in that area as far as like what works regardless of your industry or your platforms.
Awesome. And Amanda, welcome.
Thank you. Amanda Moran. I'm the Director of Account-Based Marketing and Sales Development for Smarsh. So really rolling out the ABX approach within the Enterprise Business Unit and leading our SDR team and similarly digital and demand generation efforts. Happy to be here.
Great introductions. Thank you so much. So let's start with the big question at the heart of this episode. What's the real difference between fit-based and intent-based targeting, and which one should marketers trust more? To me, fit means understanding which companies are fundamentally aligned with your product, even if they are not showing signals yet. And intent tells you who's actively researching solutions right now. Fit gives you scale and predictability, and intent gives you timing. But do you agree with that definition, or has your experience told you something totally different?
I think how you define fit probably leans in a little bit more to whether the definition is accurate. I think oftentimes sales leadership and sales teams lean a bit more to what they want the right fit to be, right? We would love this big account. It'd be so cool to have that logo. And in reality, there needs to be some data behind it and looking about where you've won before and what are the attributes and who would benefit from your product. And so I think it's a bit more nuanced. I think the other thing that in my career I found surprising sometimes is even if you do all that data stuff, there are absolutely prospects out there that might come up with another use for your tool that you didn't think about. And I think with that, it's being mindful of, okay, now that this new industry found an interest, are we just blowing up fit, or are we realizing that this could be an outlier and we still want to stick to our homegrown ICP and be available and test in those new markets?
So true.
Yeah.
Fit-based targeting can be very nuanced. Yeah. What about the rest?
I think for me, when we're looking at fit versus intent, I'd like to just take it one step back and just look at the strategy, because I think what you really need before you're looking at fit versus intent is the strategy behind what you're doing. And I think that's my background. I work with a lot of marketing strategy, and that's always going to be like at my core where we're looking at, because I think with fit and intent, you need both, and you can't have one without the other. And it just depends on the strategy of the type of campaign that you're running. So I think for me, I agree with the statement, but I think you need both to be able to maximize on fit and intent.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, Cecilia. I like to say that, showing interest might not mean they're the right fit. They might think they are, but they're not. And every great fit isn't ready to buy either, right? Like I might have somebody who's a millionaire and loves Louis Vuitton, but is not ready to buy the newest Louis Vuitton bag because they have 100 of them, right? So that to me is like where that's where you need to have that fit-based targeting added into the intent targeting. I guess they have the intent to buy that, but instead of even looking at firmographics and demographics, things like title, role, seniority, the industry, the company size, the revenue can all impact how you want to target them. A startup company is going to be very different how you target them than a multi-billion-dollar company, right? And who you target in those as well. I just think though I agree with everybody on this panel that those two the mix of the two is super important. And I think I was funny when we were talking about sales. Everybody had a little smirk on their face, and I told Joaquin when we had our initial call that how important it is to have that sales to marketing loop tied really tight. And I think that's where a lot of companies that I've worked for have needed some improvement, is that they're not getting the feedback after the sale, like, okay, what really pushed the sale, which we can turn into the beginning of our marketing as well. So that all fits into the intent as well as the fit, as well as getting to know like who's actually being successful.
So true, so important, that sales and marketing alignment. Okay, so let's talk about when intent data is truly useful and when it falls short, okay? We often treat intent as a shortcut to action, but it can also mislead us if the data lacks context or accuracy, as you mentioned, that sales and marketing alignment, Courtney, right? Lisa, you mentioned in our prep call that when targeting enterprise buyers, orchestration tools sometimes miss the nuance your sales team pick up offline. Can you expand on that?
I mean, I think with a lot of intent, it really depends on the overall type of product that you have and the size of the organization that you're targeting. And so probably build upon themselves when you're in a situation where you're targeting a larger company with a buying committee that's a little bit more complex. So the intent signals there are really key to have kind of a very well orchestrated intent layer engine that's going to give you that sense of confidence that those signals are not really just a bunch of noise, or they're not coming from just one particular contact, or maybe even a few contacts that may not be related to the product or service that you're offering. So it becomes a little bit complicated, and many of the tools that are on the market today are not quite tuned up for that very complex enterprise buying committee decision. I think some of them can probably work really well. I've worked in previous orgs that we've had different go-to-market strategies, more SMB versus enterprise versus commercial. And so I think, with SMB, you can get clearer signals to intent. You're looking at smaller buying committees. Sometimes the solutions that you're offering are point solutions. So when you're getting that intent signal, they're very specific. So getting back to your question, Joaquin, on a complex B2B buying decision committee, which is where I'm at currently, what we try to do is take a look at a common trend, if you will, across different signals and try to score that. I'll use that word score loosely because there's a few different things going on in there, not just your traditional, marketing automation platform scoring, but there's a few other things going on there. And we've created a KPI called Marketing Qualified Account, and it includes, different characteristics of the contacts that are associated to that account and what type of signals and intent they're showing. And based upon that knowledge, looking at the trends from some of our previous signals, we make a determination that, that account might need to be prioritized for a particular program or campaign that we go forward with. So it does get a little bit more complicated as you get into those very complicated enterprise, large enterprise account deals.
Yeah, that's so interesting. You can't rely just on one tool when you're talking about these very complex decision-making processes, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And I think on the other side of that, like you getting that intent, so I kind of think of it as a maturity gap. So that fit data defines your ideal customer profile, right? But your intent data prioritizes who you're going to engage with, right? And I think from a marketing to sales perspective, needs clearer way to define those engagement criteria, right? Because, for example, I've had people, they're just wanting to do the renewals because that's easy money, get the renewals and everything like that. So they don't prioritize this high interest because it's more of a risk, right? So by having that data to back it up, and saying it's based on our, not only is it based on our ideal customer profile, but also this is the intent data and their, whatever you want to call it, level one priority, because they're really engaged, right? And making that clear to sales, like, hey, these are people who are really actively engaged. Like, this is not just some person who clicked a link and we'll never see them again. Like, this is somebody who's engaged actively and meaningfully, and kind of delivering that value to sales. I think is something that's really complex to do in today's environment, because we have so many data points, and it's hard to congeal it all into a way that's manageable for sales to action on.
I think the maturity level within the sales teams also vary quite a bit. So there's so many tools and platforms out there. You might have someone that's senior, that's very used to the tools, or, has been working in the tools a lot, and then they'll have a completely different understanding to that versus someone that's just coming in. Yeah, so I think it's that level of education as well, where you kind of always need to make sure that they are on top of the different platforms and understanding, where the data is coming from, what the data is, and how it's used and how we can utilize it moving forward.
And I think intent itself, where I've found the best success, is explaining it's really a fish finder for them. Like, instead of going in the vast ocean of stuff, like, you can fish here in this pond, but you still need to do the work. It's still not perfect. And certainly when the data is a mess, it can be frustrating at times, but it's still, I think, directionally is helpful for them when they're thinking about where to spend their time.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So now let's shift to fit. When we talk about fit-based targeting, we are really asking who are the right companies for us, even before they are showing intent. How do you define what a good fit account looks like in your strategy? What signals or attributes matter most?
I think it depends on your product and your offerings. I mean, for us within Smarsh, like, our ideal customer are really financial services and highly regulated industries, because that's one of the main problems we solve. I think where it gets interesting from a where do we focus our time standpoint is there are certainly businesses outside of financial services that could leverage from compliance tools, but their volume of regulated users is much smaller. So if we can't convince them of the broader value to avoid litigation, it's still an enterprise sale. It's still going to take 18 to 24 months, but we might only make, 25 grand off of it versus, a multi-million-dollar deal. And so when they're thinking through defining that fit overall, I think they also have to find the right balance for return on our time investment, and if it's worth actively going after those deals as well.
Yeah, I would agree with Amanda. I think on all those points, I mean, you have to know where your product is going to be best fit and best utilized within an organization. Also, to Cecilia's point of looking at overall strategy, what is it that we're trying to achieve? I think at that point you have to also realize, like, what is going to be the best success path for you at that time. And how with enterprise deals, they generally take very long, and so you have to place your bets early. Sometimes those cycles are 12 to 18 months out, and sometimes longer. And so if you're clear on the strategy as well as the fit of where you're going to place that bet very early, then you can start to seed out those campaigns and those messages to try to bring that generate that demand in the market, and then be able to capture it when those intent signals are showing you some readiness to purchase.
Yeah, and Courtney, I remember in our briefing call you mentioned that your team at Sage blended quantitative signals with qualitative insights, like analyzing thousands of handwritten cancellation notes to understand the customer sentiment. I think that's a great example to uncover fit through real human context. The thing that we discussed before about being close to sales and actually asking them to fill information, or like, and I would love to know, how do you see that approach evolving with AI tools becoming more common, and you can analyze all this information today and you can define what is fit, what is intent much more easily, right?
Absolutely. Well, I think with AI, like a lot, like anything with AI, I think it's making things a lot easier, but also we as marketers need to be also questioning it as well. So I think it's made it a lot easier to dive into a whole bunch of data. So for example, we had the thousands of cancellations, like seeing like, okay, these people canceled because their business went out. they went out of business, or these people canceled because they outgrew the product, or these people canceled because they moved to a competitor, right? And it was how we used AI in that scenario is we had actual paper cancellation forms saying, hey, this is why. And we had, a couple hundred to thousands of those cancellation notices that had exactly why these people canceled the product. And so it had been a couple years, we're like, hey, we have all this data like on these people. How can we not use it? And like, well, it's, paper, and, there's no good way to like read it. I'm like, well, we have, AI tools and like vendors now that I think can probably turn this into actionable data for us. So that's what we did. So we found a vendor that could translate it into a new thing. And yeah, we found some really great data points that were actually based on real customers, and not just speculation based on, what we've heard from one or two customers, or what one, higher up salesperson had heard from their clients. It was really based on true consumer data. And I think getting real data and using AI to enhance the insights into that data, I think is kind of how we can merge those two worlds. And like I said, you just need to be careful on the back end, because AI is not perfect yet. And when it is, I'll be really scared. But just looking at it and taking those notes. For example, another example is we had some data on a new product, and we had a couple people sign up for it, but then just having a human connection, talking to sales, like, oh yeah, we've only been selling it to the 1 or 2 years, people who've been with us for 1 or 2 years. I'm like, whoa, well, that now skews the like 70% of people who are buying in the first year or two. That's why, because that's the only people we're selling to, really, right? And if I had not had that human to human connection, like AI can't tell you that, right? So you got to kind of blend those two.
Yeah, and Amanda, when you mentioned before that sometimes you have these outliers that are not maybe your right fit account, I don't know how AI is helping you to process that data and make decisions faster.
So I think we are probably, I would say we have been, as a company that offers AI as a part of our platform, it's interesting that we are very guarded with how we use it and what data we put into tools. And so I would say we are probably still in our infancy. I think within marketing, we've seen some value in really just testing, like if we put different data in, can we do any modeling or get any insights that way? The company is very guarded around our Salesforce data in particular and where we put it. And so we're working on ways to be able to action it with AI tools. But I would say we have a lot of opportunity there. Right now, it does inform our predictive model within 6sense. So anything that's in the account and the opportunity record, contacts, leads. So we are able to leverage that to inform, right, like where to fish and who might be a qualified account. But I am still hungry for hearing how my peers are using it, because I do feel like we could get some really great value and learn a lot about the data we do have.
I think I couldn't agree more with what you're saying, Amanda, because I feel like we're in a transition period now where obviously everyone is talking about AI. I also work for a company where we push industrial AI. We work a lot with agentic AI. And then internally, we have rolled out Copilot for the whole company. And we talk about the importance of it. We know what it can do, but a lot of the times, just because you have the data there doesn't necessarily mean that you have the processes in place. So it's like if when we're working with lead generation and we have a lot of leads, I have companies coming to me all the time selling me these leads platforms, and we can offer you 20,000 leads or 2,000 leads, whatever, and that's great, but we don't have a system internally to process the leads to make it efficient on our side. So I think it's very interesting and hearing from our peers how people are utilizing and making the most of AI, because we're still learning, right? And there's so many platforms out there. I mean, there's so much information, and on a weekly basis, we have in our like Viva Engage, our internal system, updates on new platforms, on how you can, listen to a book faster, or how you can update your copy better. Like, there's so much AI data out there. So I think it's a very interesting time we're in, but it'll be very, I think when we've used it a little bit more and we've become a little bit more comfortable, and when we can see how it's actually improving our day to day, because with my company, we're transitioning from Marketo to HubSpot. And I think, being a HubSpot user myself from 10 years ago, I think HubSpot is a very dynamic, it's a great tool, and Marketo good, but it's not like. It'll be very interesting to see now how HubSpot has evolved and what they're doing in terms of going from your CRM to your campaign building, your events execution. Like, it'll be so interesting to see. I'm just waiting for the day where you just get a notification where everything has been sorted, but obviously we're not there yet. But yeah, I think looking at AI, it'll be very interesting to see.
Yeah, so yeah, I totally feel you on the CRMs, especially the last couple companies I work for have had multiple CRMs, and having that challenge as well where they don't talk to each other. Like, it's a whole nother challenge of, like, Salesforce might have like the marketing data, the campaign data. It's like, hey, Bob Smith went through this campaign, but then a whole nother CRM has the sales data, right? And another challenge we've run into recently is, let's say Amanda goes to my webinar, right? But Lisa is the boss who actually signs off on the paperwork. And then, even though it was my webinar that influenced the decision of Lisa, because Amanda told her, hey, this webinar, here's this really great product, right? Lisa's on it. So how do we match that up? And that's been another challenge that we ran into. And the one solution we had was using the domain name and kind of putting that with one or two other places. So that's another challenge, is getting CRMs to work together as best as possible before, ideally we'd have one CRM and everything's there and like everything's right there. We all know that that's not reality. At least not yet. You got to kind of cobble it together sometimes.
Yeah, Cecilia, I'm waiting for that day when I can get that email and it's all just working perfectly.
Yeah, it's all just there.
We just go about our day. Have
just
a nice
magic.
fun lunch.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can even,
our product is built on AI. We're in AI operations. AI ops is the category for what we do. We work with, helping to improve IT operations at the enterprise level. So AI is not new to us. We're not built on Gen AI. We're built on, other types of models of AI, being a 10-year-old company. But, even we've had some guardrails, to Amanda's point of making sure that not private information or confidential information is getting out. And, Cecilia, with the plethora of tools, and Courtney, there's data here and data there and data everywhere. You don't know where to start sometimes. So I think initially, last year we were dabbling a little bit more with content, using the tool ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot now is also rolled out, just to kind of brainstorm a little bit on campaign messaging, campaign ideas, and just use the tool to kind of be your brainstorm partner, if other people in the team were not readily available with you. And that works. I think that's a good start. I think being able to wrangle that data and get some insights from it is also very interesting. Of course, you have to be mindful of what you're putting in there and how you shape it and prompt with it to get kind of the responses that you're looking for. I think there's a lot of companies out there. I agree with Cecilia. It's a bit of a minefield almost, because you're thinking about companies that have, not even 12 or 24 months in business. And, with procurement being, very particular about those things, you have to be careful what you're bringing on board and what you're taking in and what their security posture is. So there's really a lot to consider. But I think the good thing is our leadership has embraced it and has really given us the opportunity to experiment with it, with some guardrails in place. And I think not force feeding it, like I hear from some of my peers, where like, oh my gosh, if I don't come up with a plan that has AI in it, I'm going to look like I'm last year's news, right? And so I think it's nice that we're given that freedom to think through it carefully and experiment with it. So looking forward to seeing where of course that's going to progress going forward.
Yeah, I think one place where AI has been very powerful, at least for me, has been in repurposing content. Repurposing, a webinar into a blog, into social media posts, into you can even make generate a podcast on AI. An AI podcast now. And I mean, I tested one out for like a 5-minute one, and I'm like, okay, one of the voices was like really good. You would never know it was not a real person. The other one was, not so great. So it's still getting there, but the opportunities to 10x the reach and reach people in the type of content they want to see, whether that's podcasts, whether that's a blog, whether that's a social media post, whether that's a white paper, whether that's an email, like, and using those and just making it so it's all cohesive and crisp, no matter where they get that our message, I think is the thing that I'm most excited about with AI, is to be able to reach people in more places more easily. So I'm very excited to see kind of how that develops.
Yeah, and I need to say I'm just an avatar here, and
No, we are real. This is real.
this is real. Yeah, for all the ones listening, this is real. Okay, so let's dig into how the balance between fit and intent changes depending on the market that you are targeting. Cecilia, you mentioned the strategy is so important, right? Strategy comes before fit and intent.
I so strongly believe that, because I think you can get so lost in translation when you don't have a proper strategy in place. And I think especially, I mean, I've worked in SaaS companies and I've worked in smaller businesses where, the intent is very important, and, down to the call to action button on your landing page can increase from, 40% to 60% just by placing it correctly. And I think where I'm now, it's a much bigger company. We're 10,000 people working all over the world. And I think with the type of customers we do have and our sales cycles that are, anything from 12 months up to 24 months, it's very different how you strategize with your fit versus your intent. And
It's that balance between fit and intent.
yeah, so I think for us, like, especially when I'm looking, so I work very specifically on our go-to market, which means that I'm going for new prospects. So depending on the industry, because I work with 3 industries, it depends on the companies that we're going after, what industry we're going after, because aerospace and defense is incredibly different from a service industry. If I am, creating campaigns for a manufacturing in a defense space, there's a lot of regulations, there's a lot of critical information that needs to be considered, versus if I'm making a campaign towards a manufacturing company that's creating chocolate, So I think when you are looking at the different companies and you are looking at the different prospects, for me, with the campaigns I run, whether it be an ABM campaign or like a regular, digital campaign with events and other actions in place, fit for me will always be the one that I really prioritize. And I understand, for me, like, obviously intent is important as well with the actions that you put in place. But for me, with the type of companies that I work with now and the type of prospects I have now, fit and the strategy behind it is incredibly important.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. Lisa, in our earlier conversation, you talk about how going up market means you can't rely on a scale, and precision and alignment matter much more. Can you expand on that?
I think you can get to scale, but I think before you scale, I think you have to, get a few things right first, because then you're just kind of adding more complexity on top of it, trying to scale too quickly. I think, for us, it's a smaller number of accounts that can really move the needle, given the size of the average deal. And so it's not so much getting the signals right across a very large quantity of accounts. It's more about understanding that particular departments within some accounts have certain nuances, and so we might kind of beachhead into a few of those departments first and kind of land there, and then from there we can increase our products throughout that account, kind of looking at like a land and expand type of strategy there. So once we get into landing and we get some traction, then we can increase the scale. And the scale can be automated. We can run automated campaigns using some of the workflows that are built into some of the tools that we have. And we can also automate it through some of the outreach that we do through our SDR team, through some of the tools that they're using. And we then can amplify that messaging a little bit more, and then just kind of rinse and repeat, as we're moving through different roles within the enterprises that we target.
They use a combination of both, in which they could be showing all the intent in the world, but if they're not a fit for your product, you're just kind of wasting your time there. And so we use that fit and then layer on the intent with the understanding that we're also going to pilot into, some secondary fit industries to see how that might work. But the lion's share of everything we do, at least within the enterprise business unit, because we do have such a finite number of accounts we can go after, is really using both sets of data in tandem. Now, where the challenges then come for me is we have multiple products. And so, okay, I have to run a program or a marketing play for each of the products. And at times they're going to overlap. How am I segmenting, right? And in some cases, Lisa, you mentioned buying committees, like it's very clear. There's a certain persona within the company I can target with that message. But in others, well, it's the same people. So how do you marry it together or separate? And the intent can help inform it, but I think a lot of our topics that we rely on are a bit general, and it's not as crystal clear as they were searching for intent data versus a marketing automation platform, right? It's like they're looking at compliance and they're looking at archive. Okay, well, you have to capture stuff to put it in the archive. So now it's two products. And so it can be a little bit challenging, but it at least helps us center around something when we're standing everything up.
Yeah, and I like to simplify fit versus intent targeting by thinking about like dating, right? Your fit basis, you have the same interests, same values, same lifestyle, maybe even live nearby. It looks like perfect on paper, right? But that doesn't mean they're actually somebody you want to date right now, right? They might be been unemployed for 5 years and live with their mom or whatever you want to say, right? That's where the intent-based targeting comes in. Or find someone that's actually going on dating apps, going on dates, and clear and ready for a relationship, right? And signals those intents to you. So, right, they're in that. That's how our in-market people. So even if they don't perfectly match your type on paper, the real magic, they're there. So that's where the real magic happens when you combine the two, for sure. And I think, to Amanda's point, that is a challenge in marketing, especially in SaaS, is two products competing for the same people. I had one of the smaller products in one of my organizations, and a lot of times they wanted them to migrate to the higher end product, balancing that need of wanting them migrate and then also keeping my product vibrant, healthy, and ready to go was always a challenge. It's really just to combine two. I know it sounds almost like a cop-out answer, but you really need both, and you really need to pay attention to both to get the most out of your marketing.
That's a great analogy. And I think adding to that, I think it's so important to have some guidelines where if you receive a lead that is showing intent, there are certain aspects of the account that you are willing to negotiate and others that actually you just you can't like dating,
like deal breakers, like, all right,
deal breakers.
Yeah,
I love that analogy. That's so good. That's so good, actually. I'm gonna start using that because I think when you work in B2B a lot, people kind of forget that, oh, it's B2B, but the B2B, we're talking to a person on the other side of the other B. Like it's not some sort of robot waiting for you. So I think just getting that more human element is really important.
Yeah, that's how I explain it to sales too. I always say sales is the person who can pick up someone at a bar, and marketing is the person who can keep the relationship going.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, I can go on with that. I can go on with that analogy. But yeah, no, there are deal breakers. If they don't have enough revenue to buy your product, it's a very simple. Obviously, they're making zero revenue, they're not going to be interested in buying product. Or if they're not in your tax record, I will say like they're a much bigger company and your product is made for smaller companies. They're not fit. So there are some deal breakers. I just love that term. Now I'm laughing at it. But yeah, no, I think with marketing, you can get a lot. Sales thinks it's all like woo woo and like not real impact. But if you put in real terms like that, like, hey, no, we're trying to set these parameters to be the matchmaker for you. And I think if you put in like those real human terms, I think it's easier for them to digest versus like, oh, you just put an email out, which I think sales thinks that's all we do is email campaigns sometimes. But.
Yeah. Oh, we should do an episode on that, Joaquin.
Oh no, yeah.
That's so true.
Oh yeah.
That's so true. Yeah, and put the shiny logos as well.
Yeah, do the leaflets. I can't even remember last time I created a leaflet, but that's the one.
Yeah. What we change about sales, Joaquin? That's
what we wish sales understood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's much more difficult. Heck, way to say it, Amanda.
Definitely. Okay, so to wrap up, let's look ahead. Okay, we already talked a little bit about this in general, but how do you see AI changing how we define and detect both fit and intent? Could we get to a point where technology predicts who will show intent before they actually do? What are your thoughts on this?
I would say I think it depends on how much. I think it depends on how we push the data into AI. I think that if you have clean data in there, and that's another thing that I think is going to be a challenge with AI is people just putting in AI data, whatever data they have, and not looking at it. And I think I'm guilty of it. I don't look at the data closely sometimes. Like, hey, you know what? There's multiple people from this one company in this data set. Might skew it a little bit, but I think it's definitely the clean data is going to be super important to make AI actionable and make it so we can see those intent clearer. Because if they say, Acme company has clicked on this 1,000 times, but it was the same one. Amanda's the one person and clicking it 1,000 times. You know what I mean? Like that's where the challenge comes as far as trusting AI to read those intent signals, and that's where you're always going to need a human eye to be like, yeah, I doubt Acme has looked at this 1,000 times. Like I think it's probably just one person reopening it. I've had that happen with emails. I'm like, oh wow, Acme Corporation opened this 20 times. Like, oh, it's the same 3 people opening up 5,000 times because they couldn't remember where it was.
Or even the
I
spam
think
filters going through, like reopening and clicking everything, that tends to skew things quite a bit as well.
Oh yeah, that's a very good point. I didn't even think about that. You're right.
But I think to the point about data, I don't think it will ever be perfect because my entire career, every company has always had some sort of a data cleanliness or like there's always a challenge with the data. So I think we can get closer and improve simply because at the core of all of that is still humans with the inputs. I don't think
yeah.
we'll ever get to a point of perfection with being able to predict things, but I think AI will still help us for sure.
I think when we're looking at tools and platforms today as well in terms of AI, like I don't know if this is UK statistics, but on average, 57% of the people that are looking in the buying process, 57% of them are looking in the buying process before they even contacting a seller. So I think the more we know these statistics and the more we know about people actually being online, because we're online all the time, the more we can optimize the platforms that people actually go on. When we're looking at the cookies, we're looking at all sorts of like back end systems that we can utilize. And if we can get better at that, I think it'll help us moving forward a lot more on the front end process of what we're doing to get the data that we actually need. Because I think right now everything is very siloed still. We're looking at SEO, we're looking at the digital side, we're looking at the digital ads, Google ads, like everything just is one thing. Obviously, Courtney, Lisa, Amanda, I think you work with this type of data a lot more than I do. So you have to stop me if I'm wrong here. But I think because everything is so siloed still, we need something to really get the data together so we can get a holistic view of what we're doing.
Yeah, I think that is versus markers because the customer journey is so complex nowadays. The customer journey is so complex. Like having that attribution is just becoming a bigger and bigger challenge for us as marketers as far as like what actually moved the needle enough for them to be like, you know what? All right, let's go. I want to talk to somebody in sales, right? So I think, like you said, Cecilia, combining those would be ideal. But I think we also got to be resilient and scrappy as marketers and kind of use our intuition as marketers. Be like, you know what? Even if it's just as simple as a date, like, hey, we had this webinar, we had this email campaign go out on this date, and within the next 30 days, we saw a 10% spike in sales. And that's not in our normal pattern of behavior for our sales team. Like we can probably attribute that campaign to that 10% spike in sales if we don't have any other major things going on, right? Like just kind of being scrappy and really looking for those signals, I think is going to be where marketers it will never take over for AI as far as those intuitive signals like, this looks right, or this doesn't look right, or that's interesting. Like let me
Yeah.
look deeper into that.
And you need to remember that all the tools that you mentioned were designed for B2C marketers. All of them, Google, Meta, even LinkedIn was designed for recruiters. So yeah, hopefully AdSact can help you with that, okay? Where you can have a full view of your total addressable market and you can serve ads to them, everything from one platform. You can serve ads to them on LinkedIn, Meta, Google, stack it up, and do the reporting and attribution in one platform. But
if anybody's listening to this is starting making that platform, give me a call. I'd love to be on the ground floor of that.
Yeah.
well, let's have that call. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for today's recording. I think today's conversation showed us how much nuance there is between fit and intent. We heard that intent data can be powerful when using context, but it's not a silver bullet. It often needs to be balanced with deeper understanding of who are the best fit accounts that are actually there. And the real opportunity lies in combining the two, using fit to focus and intent to prioritize. Thank you all so much for joining today's episode. And yeah, thank you so much, Lisa, Cecilia, Courtney, and Amanda for joining us today. And enjoy this discussion. Don't forget to follow B2B Marketing Futures for more conversations with marketing leaders shaping the future of B2B marketing. See you next time. Thank you so much.